So now what we understand is that both for visual, recall is up to the top right, create is to the top left. For auditory, it's to the horizontal to the right, and then to create, horizontal to the left. That's pretty straightforward, isn't it?
This podcast is sponsored by Pragmatic Solutions, the player account management platform chosen by today's smart betting and gaming operators. Don't let technical constraints delay you from achieving your business goals. Expand your business, boost your margins, and dominate the market in any leading regulated jurisdiction with our powerful, flexible, and secure iGaming platform. Enjoy its extensive marketing tools, compliance protection, real-time data, and a wide portfolio of over 1,000 industry providers. It's time to upgrade your technology. Let Pragmatic Solutions show you the modern approach. Visit pragmatic.solutions and join the smart thinkers.
This podcast is brought to you by Pragmatic Play, a leading game developer providing player favorites to the most successful brands across the industry. With an award-winning multi-product portfolio of slots, live casino, bingo, virtual sports, and more, Pragmatic Play is powering up new possibilities of play through one single API. Visit pragmaticplay.com and discover your favorite every time.
As always, Kelly, it's fantastic to be back in the studio with you. We are now recording our second out of 6 episodes covering NLP and the magical techniques it unfolds. So NLP stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming. Neuro, brain, linguistic, the way we talk, express ourselves, programming, how we potentially reprogram ourselves to lead a better life, to lead others, to lead ourselves, to enjoy life in a better way, I guess. And I think we have just said that it's really good that I also did this course, NLP course. So I understand what you talk about and maybe can sort of ask the stupid questions so that you get to explain everything. Because who are you?
For those who didn't get the benefit of listening to the first episode, and I insist you go back and listen to it, I'm Kelly McSherry. My career spanned everything from business, and I retrained as a psychotherapist, and then I fell in love with NLP, and I'm now a trainer of NLP, and I'm also an executive coach, a certified executive coach.
Today, last time we talked about building rapport. Today, we're going to talk about preferred representation systems. And this was one of my tricky things. We had to paint pictures of a face with eyes. And this is a very focus on the eye movements, correct? So if I talk to you and I ask you a question and you have to think, if you are moving your eyes to that way or to this way or down here or to down that way, it means specific things. So if parts of building rapport is difficult, we were talking about breathing and blinking at the same time. This is the hardest one because people also have different inclinations. So we can be reversed from each other. So now we're hardcore, but maybe we can do a light version of the preferred representation systems that we use.
Absolutely. And I think you described it beautifully. And it's interesting you talk about it being the hardest part. I think that it's in terms of somebody starting to put these techniques into practice, it's the simplest thing to start to notice, actually. So what all the research tells us, this was done it was Richard Bandler that started to notice that when they were doing their research around NLP, he started to notice that when people went back into memories, their eyes went to specific places. And it's really straightforward. There's two ways you can look at it. Well, there's actually 2 ways that people are wired, if you like. We call them normally organized. So they're the ones we're going to talk about. And those people that are reversed organized just store the same information just in a different space in their brain. That's all it means. Although they access it different ways, sorry. So there are 4 representational systems. Well, there are 6 actually, but there are 4 that we can establish from people's eye accessing cues. And they're visual. So we can understand if somebody is starting to recall a visual memory. And that we do by looking at when their eyes go up to the top right or the top left.
Or that way. Is it reversed when it's on Zoom as well? How do we know?
Yes, it does. No, it depends. That's a challenge because if you're on Zoom, you don't know if the other person's got their camera to set up to mirror their body language or if it's set up in reverse. So it can be a little bit challenging. But if you're really attuned to what's going on with the other person, then you can really start to notice habits and repetition. So therefore, you can get a good idea.
Right.
So those people that are normally organized, which is the majority, then they will look for memories. So if I ask you right now, what was the color of your bedroom when you were growing up, Heidi?
I would go,
Precisely. Your eyes go up to the right as I'm looking at you. So therefore, I know that you're going into your memory to recall a visual. So it could be a movie or it could be a still image, whichever it is. Your eyes are giving me the clue that you're going in to look at that memory. So that's for visual recall. Now, if I was to say to you, what does a hippo with 16 legs and with polka dots on it look like? Precisely, your eyes would go wide open. But then what your eyes moved up to the top left.
yes.
So your mind has to go away, because it's such a crazy thing I've asked you to do. Your mind has to go away and think, well, what the hell would a hippo, I'm doing it now. What would a hippo with 16 legs and polka dots look like? And so your mind goes, your eyes go up to the opposite side, the top left, as I'm looking at you when you're normally organized. So I would know that you're going in to create what that may look like. So it's a straightforward way for me to be able to understand how you recall visual memories or you create something visually. Now, the next one is auditory. So it speaks for itself. So if I were to ask you now, Heidi, to go back and play in your head your favorite song, then your eyes would move. That's it. So interestingly for you, you're wired visually. So it's interesting. You went up to look at what it looks like, and then you listen to it. So we know when somebody's listening, excuse me, because their eyes move horizontally. So when they're going into memory about auditory, they move horizontally to the right. You'll have noticed by now, visual recall is up to the top right as we're looking at the person, and auditory recall is horizontally to the right. So memories about things we know are stored generally by people by accessing them by looking to the right as we're looking at them. Now, if I was to ask you again to think about what would it feel like to listen to the Swedish national anthem when somebody's singing it with a Japanese accent.
Now, this, I was going to say now because I know I will do it automatically, but I did that even before I even thought about it. So you look down to reach the kinesthetics.
You can, but it depends again, and we'll talk about this more in a moment. The thing you would have done, you would have gone down to feel what it feels like, because that's the way you naturally go about things, and then you went to go and listen to it. So in order to listen to it, your eyes went across to the left as I'm looking at you, horizontally. Similar to the visual create, top left to create something visually, and it's horizontally to the left to think about something auditorily that you might hear that you have to create. So now what we understand is that both for visual, recall is up to the top right, create is to the top left. For auditory, it's to the horizontal to the right, and then to create, horizontal to the left. That's pretty straightforward, isn't it? Now, the two other key representational systems that we have that we can start to understand about how somebody's accessing memories is to do with, in NLP speak, you call them kinesthetic feelings, pretty much, for want of a better way of putting it. So the place that, let me ask you the question, where would, if you were walking along, actually you were telling me before we came onto this that you went out surfing. So how did it feel for you to be able to do that amazing surfing session yesterday, Heidi?
It was amazing. It's absolutely amazing. But what it is, it's if someone tells me something, gives me a tip or an idea, then I have to close my eyes, probably look down and go, relive it, the session, for instance, or imagine in the future what I need to do in order to achieve something, for instance.
And what was really interesting for me when I asked you about your surfing session, what your eyes did, first of all, you went straight up to the visual recall to see what it looks like. And then not only did your eyes close, but they started to move down to the bottom left and your head moved with them. So there's so many bits of information that you gave me about knowing that although I couldn't see your eyes all the time, they've moved down to the bottom left because that's where your head naturally went. Remember, this is when you're looking at somebody normally organized. So that's where we keep and we store memories that are to do with kinesthetic things, so things that we feel. So whether it's, there's always all sorts of different ways of testing this. What was your surfing session like? What's it like walking along a warm beach with the sand between your toes? All these different ways of being able to access these memories. The last one that we all do, everybody does this, is it's called auditory digital, so AD, if you like. So AD is that self-speak that we have before we share something. So AD is stored in the bottom right. So if I'm looking at somebody and I ask them a question, chances are they're going to see what the memory looks like, or they might hear what the memory looks like, or create visually or auditorily, then rehearse it. Their eyes move to the bottom right, and then they give you the information. Some people, so we've covered all the rep systems, representational systems now. Visual recall, visual create, auditory recall, auditory create, kinesthetic bottom left, and auditory digital bottom right. Now, the benefit of understanding about how somebody recalls memories or creates ideas is that we can notice if they go to visual, auditory, kinesthetic, or auditory digital. Therefore, we can start to adapt our communication with them. So for me, I'm hugely visual, and then it's kinesthetic for me. So for you, it's pretty similar, actually. You're very visual, and then there's a bit of kinesthetic that's in there. So for me, now I'm starting to tune into this with you. I can start to adapt the way I'm going to tell you my message by shifting my language. So I could say to you, oh gosh, that looks amazing. Having been out in the ocean and seeing the waves and seeing all your colleagues out there and having a great time. And for you doing that 8.5 meter jump, that must have looked sensational for you. And you must have felt great. So all I've done there is to be able to describe your experience based on your preferred representational system. The benefit of this, and this goes back to the first podcast, this really speaks to the idea of building rapport with somebody. It helps us to understand how they store information, how they create new ideas, and therefore gives me everything that I need to be able to nuance my message to them based on what works for them. So therefore, it goes back to building trust and rapport. But it also means that when you're in a situation, we'll talk about this in another session as well, is to do with conflict. So if you find that you're just locking horns and you're not able to make any pace forwards, if you're aware of how somebody prefers to represent their internal world, if you know this, then you can start to nuance your language to sit inside their view of the world, therefore reducing significantly the risk of any kind of hostility or conflict. It's a great tool, and it's a way for people to be able to really understand each other better, actually, really get to know what works for the other.
And also, to add on to that, I would say it's a really good, not only for people in sales, but a technique to sort of get people along with you. You know, you paint a picture for the visual. You present the serenade for the auditory person, or you describe this feeling for the kinesthetic one to sort of get them on the train as well. But before we end this episode, instead of having all these terminology words, there are 6 different ways, which way was right, make it, how can I, as a normal person, use this? Start talking. What's the best way?
The same thing as I suggested before is that do it in a safe space. So that's with family or friends or people that you know really well. Start to notice what happens. It's all about your level of sensory acuity. So it's how much you're aware of what's going on for the other person. Just notice. It's a really straightforward pattern. You can Google it online, and there'll be the images you described about. Look to the top right for visual recall, horizontally to the right for auditory recall, etc. Download or look at that and have it available to you so you can see what the map looks like. It's really straightforward. There's only 6 points for you to remember. And then start to notice it more and more in people. You might choose to want to break it down. So you're just going to do visual to start with and practice visual. And if you notice when somebody's accessing memories visually, then start to adapt your language to use words like look, store, etc., etc. That way, you can start to, if you break it down into bite-sized chunks, then you can give yourself the best chance of really learning it, making yourself unconsciously competent at noticing it, and therefore giving you the opportunity to adapt your communication style with them to get the best out of the scenario.
Fantastic. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
In the next episode, Kelly, we're going to talk about enhanced influence.
We are.
Looking forward. See you then.
See you then, Heidi.